Thank you all for coming. It is a great pleasure to be able to introduce tonight's speaker and to talk a little bit about the series. I think this is, many of you know, part of a wider year-long series in conjunction with the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, the Aga Khan Music Initiative, and the Aga Khan Museum. We have all of these Aga Khan organizations have come together to try and bring an important series of talks which address some of those common shared values that all of the Aga Khan organizations have. And these shared values include pluralism, they include diversity, a greater appreciation, a greater understanding of the difference in the world and how we are stronger as a result of that difference. We are not weakened by difference, we are made better. We are enriched by the diversity, the pluralism of the world. And that's one of the things that all of our speakers over the course of this year touch upon. So this year, we've combined the efforts to host a series of public talks that address pluralism, urban studies, the built environment, and architecture. Each of the different organizations has suggested speakers that are able to touch on aspects of that shared vision that reflect the organization's strengths and priorities. Tonight's speaker, Farrokh Derakhshani, is particularly appropriate for several of the organizations because he has a unique approach that combines material and social factors to integrate scholarship and practice in relation to the built environment. Many of you will know Farrokh Derakhshani. He doesn't need any introduction, but I will do it anyway because this is what we do. He is the director of the Aga Khan Award for Agriculture. This is an award that he's been associated with since 1982. Farrokh Derakhshani has been particularly active in both contributing to and supporting contemporary architecture of Muslim societies. His work includes the construction and management of large-scale public works and infrastructure projects in Iran, Paris, and Geneva. I think it is no exaggeration to say he is a fairly heavyweight architect in the world, full stop, but particularly within the Aga Khan Award, he has been a driving force. He's actually crucial to everything we do within that Aga Khan Award. So the architects in the room will already know all of this. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Farrokh Derakhshani, whose talk is entitled Architecture and Dialogue, in Search of a Better Built Environment. Please.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to start with, because usually when you come and give a talk, you never know who is going to be there. So sometimes the stories are heard, sometimes you know them. So it's the story, I will tell you first a story because she told me to tell some jokes. It is that I'm Iranian, as you can see with my name. And, there's one character that exists in Iran and that whole area is the Khaja, the Goar, whatever you call them. So he goes one day, this village, they pay some money to him to come. So he comes and he's fed and he says, goes to give a talk and he says, do you know what I'm going to talk about? People said, no. He says, well, if you don't know, why should I talk about that? So the next day when he went to sat again after being well fed, he says, do you know what I'm going to talk about? They say, yes. He said, well, if you know, there's no need for me to talk. And the third day when he went there, he said, so the people said, well, let's half of us say yes and half no. It's over to see. Then he said, when they answered that half us no, half no, yes and half no, he says, well, those people who know can tell the other ones. And then so this is a bit of when I'm here to talk about the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, because some people know the award quite well, some people know it less. But it is one of the very first institutions that's been established within the Aga Khan Development Network and the activities around it. And I'm going to start with a little what I'm going to do. I thought that maybe the best is I'll just give you a very brief introduction on what the Aga Khan Award is about. And then this cycle, because it's every 3 years, there are 6 projects we won an award. So I'm going to go through detail through these projects, and then you'll have a better idea what it means. There's one important thing is that within all the activities of the Aga Khan Development Network, there are certain which are working specifically on the issues of which are related to Ismaili, the history of Ismailis, and some of them are working where the Ismailis they are present. But there are a couple of the institutions where their activities are not focused on the Ismailism. It's focused on various differences at large, and one of them is the award. So this is the 14th cycle. I'm going to explain how it is. So just to give you an example, to explain where it is. So this is the Archon Development Network. Most of you know this organigram, and it's make this very special, this institutions, which is the 3 different activities of the social, economic, social, and culture development. And as you can see, the Archon Award for Architecture is one of the activities of which is under the umbrella of the Archon Trust for Culture. Actually, the award was created before the Archon Trust for Culture. The award was the only, in the early days, was the only institution which was working on that domain of culture. And then out of the activities, each time some of the activities could become another program, that program was created. So Historic Cities program, Archon education program, etc. They're all coming out of that. I'm just here showing a quote from His Highness that the way that he was looking at the award. And what he's saying is that, this whole thing is a story that is examine and analyze and understand and try to influence. I'm going to come back with the word influence once again, which is very important, that how we can make this, what are the dynamics in our societies. This quote is that it goes with one important word, that the Archon, when it was the Archon Award for Architecture was established, was a part of the duties of the Archon. When he started becoming the Imam of the Ismailis, he had a series of activities he had to do, including building schools, hospitals, and other things. So this whole thing came that building was important. He knew the challenges of making new institutions. At the same time, those were the days in the 1960s that because of this big migration of the people, especially from the rural areas to the cities, the whole dynamism of architecture, the urban, the physical built environment started changing very rapidly. And it did not change for the better. It started changing for the worst. And that is, for him, he became very concerned that why our cities are, where we live, our built environment, which one day was the symbol, because we've always saying that the Islamic, the architecture of the Muslim world was very important, was a manifest of the way of the thinking of that those people, why it has changed so bad. So he was thinking that how can he do something to help a better understanding and try to influence how it's this evolved. So in 1977, when it was awarded, they say that the first is that how we can protect the past and inspire the future. One of the most important things is that not to go on the word of nostalgia. Being nostalgic is the worst thing to do, that to repeat what has been there. And so, but at the same time, how we can not to forget it, because what was happening is all of a sudden with what is called after the Second World War, the World War II, there was this, what this was called modernism. New material was coming, and everywhere around the world, this international style was coming because it was much easier to build. But this much easier to build was, it didn't work all over the world. It was because of the climate, because of the different ideas. So this was the whole thing, is that how we can protect the past and inspire the future. The second important thing is that to improve quality of life. But Steve was saying that one of the main, the big objectives of all institutions, I think, which are working is under the Archon Development Network, is how can we have an impact on the quality of life of people. And the quality of life is both, that was what I had, it is economic, it is social and culture. And you cannot take one of those and develop one without the other. That is why it's very important that these come together. And one of them is architecture. So quality of life is a very important part of the betterment of the other. And thirdly, we talked about that one of the goals was, as I explained, it was in a quote, to examine, analyze, understand, and influence the dynamic of physical change in Islamic societies. Now, influencing is by two means. One, who are the people who are building? Technically, the architects, engineers, urban planners. They are the ones who, they go to universities, they learn how to do it. If they learn good, it's good enough. The schools they go to, teachers to do it. But the most important thing is the other people who are involved. There's no project which is done by only an architect or an urban planner. These are all collective works. The first thing is the vision of the client. If the client does not understand, you can never ever have a good project. And that dialogue is very important. Dialogue between the architect and the client. And the client, who are the clients? Someone who's building a house for himself, herself, is a client, but the decision makers, those people who've got the banks, the owners of bank industries, the governments, specifically the governments. The government's a problem, the biggest problem with the governments, and the difference which is historically, you can compare those days which everything was very good, and then today which things are not good. But usually the people who are in power, in politics, they want to do things but they can see it immediately during the period that they have been elected. And that is the whole thing, that the way they want to do it very quickly. They don't care about what's going to happen later. And this is what it's very important to have if we have an influence on them, to explain that yes, how we can best use all our resources. Resources being human resources and financial resources. They're both, when you build a building, is a huge investment. It's a lot. It requires a lot of money to do, from a small house, which is one person builds in his lifetime. That's a big effort. And if you're doing a company, whatever, it's a big effort. Now you can see here in the King's Cross, you can see what effort has gone into building this area in such a rapid way. So how can we influence those people? And that is very important. Influence is not something that you can go and give orders. You have to somehow encourage. And that is why the award was created. It means by awarding, you are encouraging those people who've done something additional to what they usually have to do, to their job. These are architects, like doctors, like surgeons, like vendors and the shops. Their job is to do something. That is technical part of it. The rest is that if you do something a little bit further, and if that effort, if it's recognized by someone else, you'll be encouraged. And also you might learn from the other people what they've done. So one of the most important things is how you can transfer the knowledge of some people who've achieved what they've done to the others. So in 1977, and then was the first cycle, His Highness asked a number of experts to help him put together the program of the war. And those people they called the steering committee. They established a system which has been the same structure has been working for the past 40 years. And the first thing they said, okay, we're going to have we have to make the eligibility criteria. What can be an award? First of all, they said, His Highness was very kind. He said, well, we'll give $500,000. That's the prize money, which has to be done. That those days was a very big amount of money. But then they decided that we should only give awards to projects which are completed and in use. That is very important because usually architects, they are very good in making the drawings, they're very good in making wonderful presentations, but what happens at the end, the reality, is not what has been the plan. Secondly, is that there should be this understanding as well. So we have to go and see the project once it's been completed and in use. So that is one of the criteria. The project should be completed and used. So when you go and check them, you make sure that it works. It's not a matter of that it's leaking or not. That is a small detail. But if the rooms are functional, if the hospital sometimes, it depends on whatever it is, if it really works, if people are happy with it. So we need at least 1 year. The second criteria was that His Highness was very keen on that this should be demonstrate what we call a service to Muslims. Now here I have to a little bit expand on that. First of all, as I've got one of my colleagues here who is giving these long talks about it, is that there's nothing called Islamic architecture. That's a word which doesn't exist. It's I can explain to you why this word comes, because you never say Christian architecture and Jewish architecture. You always say, but Islamic architecture is there. Everybody uses it. Because the other ones are, when you talk about architecture, Christian architecture, you're talking about only churches, only edifices which are meant for a specific the faith. But when you're talking about Islamic architecture, you're talking about the caravansarais and the bazaars and the whatever. Everything becomes under the umbrella. So, but what is the way it has to be used is that we're talking about the architecture of Muslim societies. It means where the Muslims live. Their way of living dictates how the space should have been. That was historically what had happened. The way the cities were formed, the houses were formed, etc. Some of them, besides the climate, besides the material, had the notion that those people who were living there, they were living there on a condition. And you can see that in different parts of the Muslim world, for example, what is the influence of Sufism, what's the influence of different ways of looking at it in different parts of the world. The same building, the same function, like a mosque, for example, in Indonesia, is very different to a mosque or a space in Morocco or wherever. So that shows that the spirit is the same. What is important is how we can make that spirit to be there. The same thing, the other thing is that in 1970s, when the world was created, still in those days, there were a number of countries which were called Islamic countries. Well, they had something called the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Conference. There were countries there which were members, and which some of them even had very small number of Muslims, like Ghana, for example, which was one of the pioneers because of Kwame Nkrumah. And then, and the people were living, the majority. But with these movements which happened after that, the movements are from both sides. It's going from east to west and west to east, and etc. So the other day in Cairo, I was giving this example. I'm going to repeat the example because you said that I have to repeat some of my jokes and examples. You know, I was given once a talk, and I had a map, and I was by color. The more Muslim, the less Muslim. So, you know, they were greener and the other one lighter. And I had Kuwait very dark green. So 99%, 99.9% are Muslims. And then France, etc., was, you know, just the land of the kuffar, just there. Someone said, oh, you've made a mistake. Someone says, you know, I live in Kuwait. And those people who've got Kuwaiti passport, they're 99.9% all Muslims. But those people who live, it's almost 50%. The other 50 are Catholic because they're coming from Philippines, etc., or the Hindus. So you're not talking about majority. So those majorities don't make sense. Same thing in France, it's a few million. And here, if you go to Bradford, for example, you know, the majority is Pakistan, so coming from somewhere else. So that is why this has changed throughout the world. So there's that's why I'm saying that when we're looking at projects, which projects are eligible, we have to be careful what they are, how that eligibility criteria can be looked at with the projects. The third, which was like any award, besides the jury members, etc., no project which has been commissioned by His Highness or AKDN is eligible. This is very important because it's good and bad. The good thing about it, it shows that we're not promoting ourselves. We're not promoting what is done. However, for example, in certain buildings, like if you want to look at a good example of a hospital, in the whole Muslim world, you will never find a better hospital than Al-Khan University Hospital in Karachi. It's one of the best hospitals architecturally. Not apparently the doctors are quite good as well. That I'm not sure. We have to have. I have not been to that hospital, but this is very important to. So it makes it that it is not promoting the project which is done by His Highness, and that is important. That sense that we're showing that the concerns of the AKDN goes far beyond only the people who are the followers. So this is something I wanted to explain as we're here, because some people know. In the past 40 years, there 14 cycles have passed. We've had projects coming from 99 countries. That shows us how much there are more countries than so-called Islamic countries. Actually, from some countries we've never had any nomination. You know, some countries which are a part of OIC, we never received any nominations. We have received a number of almost 5,000 nominations. It means projects, we've got 9,000, 10,000 which have come to us, but those who were officially went in the system around 5,000, and we've had 122 projects which won an award. From the beginning, these are these different cycles. I made them especially very small so you will not see what they are. It's because if this place had a bigger screen, you could have at least see. You wouldn't see it better. So what happened is that at the very beginning, the decision of the jury was, the steering committee, was that we will give 5 awards, $500,000, 5 awards is going to be given. That was the steering committee. The jury, they met and they came and they said, well, no, we're going to give 15 awards because we cannot find 5 projects which will send the message of the diversity of these cultures, these countries, the Muslim world, and also the building types. And then little by little, as years went through, the number of the projects that we've given award became smaller. So immediately the steering committee accepted and said, okay, if you say it so, the jury says whatever the jury says, it's an independent jury, and that's what they're going to do. So these awards that were given is around the world. They're in, I mean, just these, I love these numbers, 14 awards cycles, 122 awards, and then the way it's been split. We don't have it in Latin America, as you can see in America, in Australia, but it's how this has been spread. Also, they're exceptional. There were 4 sides that, because we give awards to a project, the awards is not given to a person. So the Al-Khan Award for Architecture is only given to projects. But exceptionally, in 4 cases, there was someone who was very important, and there was a Lifetime Achievement Award was given, which is called the Chairman's Award. This is not a decision of the jury, it is the decision of the chairman. The chairman, he decides to give it once in a while. So we had the famous architect Hassan Fatih, or we had the historian Oleg Grabar, which they had won in the different parts. Now, one of the most important things is that what is the role of how you can make an institution? Institution making is a very important, I would say, if it's well established, the institution, it would stay for a longer time. A lot of energy was putting together a system, which this system will be relevant to its time. Because sometimes you make decisions in making institutions, making organizations, which are for a very specific thinking of a time period. But the goal of this Al-Khan Award for Architecture was to be there for a much, much longer time. So what they did, they created the steering committee. The steering committee are a group of people who are architects, historians, and others, and they are the ones who they set the, let's say, the parameters of that cycle, those 3 years. They look at the different issues, see what's more important than those that day. That's what we're talking about, the relevance. Then we have a network of almost 1,000 people around the world, which they are our nominators. They're the people who have been, we trust them, that they know enough about their built environment to send us projects of importance. Then the steering committee, they select an independent master jury. So it is not the steering committee who decides what project is good or bad. It is this master jury. Then we have another layer, which it was introduced then. It's called this, what we call it, the on-site review. On-site review is an important element difference, which makes this Alcon Award for Architecture different to any other award. Usually when architecture projects are judged, materials come, drawings, photographs, mission statements, or whatever. And they come and the jury have to look at them. So later I will go and explain a little bit in details how it worked last cycle. But then we sent someone to go, an expert to go and see the project, a shortlisted. So the jury shortlist with a smaller number of projects, they go and see it. And that's very important because that is something which creates knowledge, because that is a research on its own, going and working on the different projects and different parts of the world. And then these are those people who are independent. Again, those are the people coming outside. They're not from the office. And then it's the secretariat, which we run this program from Geneva. I was questioned about the colors of these names. So this is what we call it, the name dropping slide. Name dropping slide is very important. Why it's important? Because it shows in the past 40 years, in the world of architecture, whoever was very important, most of them, I cannot say whoever, most of the most important architects, both internationally who are in the West, and those who are working on the field have been involved in this as a jury member or a steering committee member. I'm not talking about the winners. This is only the people who've been involved in the creation of this thing. And there are, there are academics, there are artists, we have got historians, sociologists, etc., journalists. So these are all the people. So they have been working together and making sure that this is not an award, which is some people, this has happened before. Some people sitting in the West say, oh, this is something for those people over there. No, we are talking about the architectural discourse internationally and what has been the influence of both sides from those people who have been involved and those people who've learned from them in this process. We go around, we have got exhibitions, we have got publications. These are all the activities we do during these 3 years. And one of the most important things that we are very active on connecting to people. In the past, we have had we say that we've been reaching over 1 billion people is because of we know that which television programs they showed us, which websites, all these things, and no other institution within the AKDN gets as much exposure than the Alcon Award for Architecture. It's very correct. What's the reason? Because we are celebrating someone who is not us. We're not going and saying we are the best. We are the best hospital. We are the best rural program. We are the best academic university. No, we're saying these other people have done a great job. Appreciate them, learn from them. And this is a story which people like, people follow. We were on some years ago, because it changes so fast now, it's more important to be on the Archdaily or Dezeen or whatever than to be on a television program. But 6, 7 years ago, still BBC was important. Still. They made a series of film on the Alcon Award for Architecture, and they gave us a report that it has been shown so many times, these half-an-hour films, and so many people around the world, around 900 million people, have seen it, potentially. And that is how we said that how you can reach to the audience. That is how you can have influence. Influence is where people who are users, they would say, okay, yes, someone else in another part of the world is doing something which maybe I can have as well. But this informing the others plays an important role. This is this circle because one might think why it takes such a long time, 3 years to go and give an award. So we have a nomination process, we have to document them, then the jury meets, they choose, we receive about 500-600 or more projects, then all of them are not eligible. This last cycle we had 380 projects which were selected, were nominated. They were presented to the jury went through them. They selected 20 projects. The 20 projects were were examined by the reviewers. Then they met again and they chose the award, and we had the award ceremony which we gave an award. So the master jury, as I was explaining, they go the first session, they go over 380 projects in 5 days. But actually they receive the material before, they've read it before. Sometimes they know, usually when people around the table, they sit, and because they come from different disciplines, from different backgrounds, different countries, it's very interesting for me sitting there, seeing the low. Yes, these projects are known by some, but what is very important, and I'm very proud of that, a lot of people don't know about the project which comes to Archive of Architecture. This has been the role of the award in the international architecture discourse, that we have brought people at the very early stages, the talents who later they became rather famous architects. There were these projects, 20 projects were in different countries, and experts were there. Here I've got my colleague Saif, who's been doing expertise of some of our projects. They go there, these are experts, an expert never goes to his own country, because you cannot go and be objective in your own country. We usually send people who would not go again, so they can say, hopefully, the truth. They go, they report back, and they come, and again, there's another very specific thing, that's why it's a very expensive venture doing. They not only send the reports, they have to come and present their findings to the jury members. It's the nature of human being that you cannot be objective 100%. You go, you like something, you might not like something. But what is important here is that because someone has spent 1-2 months doing research on a specific project, and they have been there, they've seen it, when they come back, the jury has got a very good, how should I put it, mechanism to ask questions, because if there's something not written in the report, they can ask, and then he can say yes or no, or explain further. So this is a very important, because, and sometimes I've seen in the past, a few times, someone wants to kill a project because for some reason, and the jury found there was other way around, or they gave an award to it. And some other people were so adamant on the project, which just killed the project because there was so much pushing for it, that they say, well, maybe they've given a good cake and coffee to them before coming, the architects. These are the architects, they go there, they've spent a number of days there, the experts, and then the jury meets and they choose the winners. Now I'm going to present you these 6 winners in a little bit detail. And I thought that by different examples, we can show what is the diversity of the projects, what is the different kinds of approaches, and what are the issues which are important. Because what's important in architecture is not how the project looks like. It's not the structures. It's what's the social relevance of these projects, and each of them has got their own story. The projects that have won an award, for those of you, those group who have know the Archon Award for Architecture, in the past, you've seen that we've got different kinds of projects, different scales. We have a house with a 2-bedroom house. We have got skyscrapers in Malaysia that won an award. We have got slum upgrading, conservation projects, engineering. One of the other things which has been a contribution of the Archon Award for Architecture is that I can somehow confirm that we have had an impact on the way that the discipline of the people in those who are involved in architecture, they expanded architecture. When I was going to school of architecture in the 1970s, architecture journals, you would rarely find anyone talking about anything which is going to do with social issues. You know, here in England, there was one journal. Sometimes someone would write an AD, for example, a small article, or John Turner. There were not hundreds of John Turners in England. Now there are hundreds of them. They're all talking about it. We never thought that engineering is a part of it. We were always thinking that conservation or restoration is the part, this is the archaeologist's job. We should not get involved. So that was that when we brought these projects, all of them together, and not together in a pluralistic way, it showed that what is the whole architecture. And architecture is, as we say, any intervention in the built environments. If you put a stone and you just move a stone from here to there, that is considered as architecture. The 6 projects that we're going to see are from different countries. From the first one I'm showing you is in Senegal. Now, institutions play an important role. In this project, they wanted to have a university which is not in the capital Dakar, in a way to keep people in the in intermediary cities, what we call them, in the villages. And here they wanted to have, the challenge was to have a series of classes. And as you can imagine, Senegal is extremely hot. And cooling a building is one of the most important things. And also using materials which are available and easy, techniques which are easy. So here, these architects, they came up with a very simple solution of making these a mold, which they made these kind of concrete blocks as a screen. And by doing, here I cannot show on which side I can show. Yeah. So they have these classrooms here. You can see the classrooms over there, which is all lined up, and they had to protect the building. So on one side, they made this very big, like a canopy, and the other side, they made a space. So you can see the canopy, which is so the sun would never come to the classroom, and it's a space. And also behind this wall, and they've created the space also with landscaping that they can collect the water. If there's any rain, they can all collect it. So it's a very correct way of environmentally sustainable system to keep the place. Here, this is the system they have. As you can see in the very far corner on the left, there is this space which is behind the building. So one person can move there. So no sun will hit that wall. So, and they have these are the classrooms. They have a couple of air conditioning units, but they rarely use it because they've made all these tests. It's sometimes between 5 or 8 degrees of difference between interiors outside. So when we're talking about quality of life, you have to have the quality of space to be able to be better educated in your, if it's hot, you cannot do it. If it's too good, also it's not maybe that good. So this institution, by building it, because it looks so different to the other similar schools, universities in Senegal, it attracts people. Some students don't think that, they think that because a good building, they get a better education as well. Because all these things go together, because the expectations become. So it's very important to give the right expectation to people, to say that yes, you who are not in the capital city, you deserve to have a good building as well. And so this is a very symbolic way to have, it has an impact on the way that people see it. Now from there, we're going to Bahrain. Bahrain is in the Persian Gulf, as you can imagine. It's not one of the richest of those states because it doesn't have oil, but it is it's the most the settlements that have been there. It's the oldest culture in that area, and it was based on pearl, the economy of pearl. until the Japanese came and started with the, what do you call them, what, these pearls, how do you call it? Yeah, so it became, before it was only coming from Bahrain, not the other countries. That's the main reason. So there was an old part of it called Muharraq, which is the old capital of Bahrain. And that was where all the pearl merchants were there. So as usual in many places, when Manama, which was next door, the city, the capital, became in the from 1920s, 30s, 40s, became the capital, people started moving from Muharraq to that area. So the old houses were just left, the families left. And later it became, you know, in some of my presentation, I've shown a couple of them, that you go in the streets, you walk, and you see all the ads on the wall, and it's written in Hindi. It's either Hindi or English, room for rent, etc. Because the majority of people there, they're not the local people, the Arabs, they're others, because it's a poor area. That's why. Anyway, so here we have got a very important, the role of how one person can make a change, especially if it's a woman. That is very important. So someone, the Sheikh Mai, she was the Minister of Culture. At one moment, she was the head of the cultural activities. She was very adamant herself. First, she had a house which belonged to her grandfather. She restored that in Muharraq, and then another one, and brought some elements there. Then it became, because the whole Muharraq was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, so you cannot make much changes. So they came with a very interesting project there, that this restoration works. They call it the Pearl Route. The Pearl Route is, well, I'm sorry that, you know, I can't go into details, but you can imagine that it's a route. They have restored a number of buildings along this route, and they wanted to make people that they go there. Usually, in the international world, they started having some people. It's called two charters: the Charter of Athens and Charter of Venice. That in the old areas you cannot touch this. If you don't this, if you do anything, you have to be exactly as it looked like before, etc. Which, in some places, they really take it into details, not allowing any innovation in the place. And here, what she did was that she allowed a lot of new interventions, architecture, to come in. And one of them was creating this these lamps that you can see on the top. It looks like a pearl, right? When you walk, you will never get lost. You walk through the city, you go from one area to the other, and you're always going through these. You know exactly from where you start, where you end. At the same time, cities and change. Public spaces did not, the need for public spaces was not 100 years ago what the need is today, because the societies were acting differently. Here in this case, there were some houses were abandoned or belonged, etc. They found 16 places that they made small squares along this path. So people get together there by planting some trees and also introducing new technologies in kind of these concrete, very, very modern ones. So they brought the life back to this place, and it is very active. It's from small buildings to the other ones. Here there's, for example, here there is a center for music. They've created a center of music, which is inside the city. There are two families of musicians who are working in the Muharraq. They keep working for them, so they created a space for them, a very extremely modern space. You cannot see it here, but those curtains that you can see here around, it's all metallic, just falls, keeps it, and then they take it up, and then they can have concerts, which we know that during the daytime, they come and they can practice inside. But nighttime, they can open it up, and the people around the neighborhood, they can come and enjoy the concerts. It is so they've been working because one of the reasons that they had a very good knowledge of the people there. And that was very important. And as I said, they've introduced a number of new buildings, very, very new buildings in that system, which they look really, I mean, it's well used, well adapted, and that's why it got an award. And this is something which this project, we're going to be, hopefully in London, we're going to have one event for that, to bring it to explain that we should not go and follow what has been certain rules, exactly what they are. That has to be adapted, and there's interpretation of these laws which has to be done correctly. Now we come to another project in that area, in Sharjah. This project is extremely important for me personally, for one reason. It is the project which is done by 2 architects who are the first graduates of a university in UAE. Most of the projects which are done in Dubai, Sharjah, Abu Dhabi, they're done by foreign architects. And we've never, I don't know why, but we've never had any winner from UAE. This is the first time that we're having a winner from UAE. And it was very, for me, it was very interesting to see that there are students who are from there, and they have done a project within their own neighborhood. Now, the project has got another important factor. This was a wasteland. It's a wetland and a wasteland. It was an area which was, at one moment, there was some water coming. They started dumping things in it. It became a wasteland in such sense. And they could have, but it's in a very prime land. It's in the middle of the city. They could have turned it into shopping mall, etc. But they decided to turn it into a natural area. And the first thing they did, the first step, was to clean it up. By cleaning it up, there was kind of a lake, because the water started coming in the lake. And they started to, because before there were these migrant birds going from Africa to Siberia. They would pass, they have to go through, fly through this area. They used to come. Because there was no water, they would not come. By creating that, now all the birds are coming back. So they've made an aviary. The aviary, so you can see it, they've sunken it, so you don't see the building. When you go there, you don't see the building. And it is an educational system. It is seen by the children. Here, it's very small, the photos are small, but there's 2 corridors. The children can go inside, and it's got a very interesting thing because the windows are tilted, right? So because they're tilted like that, children can see the birds, but the birds, they see the mirror, they see themselves. They don't see the people here. You can see that. So the kids can go all the way, almost touching the bird, and the birds are there. They cannot see the children. So it's a very, very popular place. People do come there a lot, and also they can go around this lake that you can see, and there are these places that they can watch the birds. So having this concept, this environmental, very important environmental project, which today we're talking about environmental issues so much, in a country which sometimes environment is not priority, is very important message that will be sent. So this is how it looks like, this area in the middle of Sharjah. The 4th project is the Palestinian Museum. The Palestinian Museum is in Bir Zayt. Bir Zayt has got the oldest university, that's very important university in Palestine. And the situation there is that, you know, there was not a museum, we can have a museum, we cannot have a museum. So Palestinians from abroad, they collected money, and the University of Bir Zayt gave the land, and they established this architecture, this museum. The architect, she was based here, but she's Irish, and she's now also doing the Grand Museum of Cairo. That's another project which is going to be opened soon. They got this museum. The museum is not huge. It's not very big. It is, one can say, it's more than a museum. It is an exhibition hall. But there's one thing very important there. And so people come, there are programs, It is quite active. And it's got very new technology. It's been really well done architecturally, and it's very active. But what is important is that the landscaping. It is sitting on that landscaping, as you can see, on the top of those hills. What the landscape architect did is that they said, there's one thing that the Israelis, they cannot take from us, is our plants and our roots. So they brought all the plants, all the species which existed historically or now in Palestine, they have used those in these lands. So this becomes something that is rooted in a way that the interpretation of the architect is that this is something you cannot get from us. It's there, and it's going to be there for a long time. So all the species were studied. Landscaping was a part of this architecture activity. So that's how you can see the way it is, and it sits on the. Now, those projects we saw, there were small, sometimes one was urban, but the other ones were not that big. We come to a project in Tatarstan. So I know that now those people who follow the Alkan Award for Architecture, now they know Tatarstan. Where's Tatarstan? Before they did not know, but I'm sure some of other people here who do not follow, they don't know where's Tatarstan. Tatarstan is, we chose Tatarstan for many reasons. This, especially, the capital was the Bulgar, was the city of Bulgar. What today the Bulgarians come from, they come from Bulgar. It's on the Volga. And Tatars were people who were traders all their life. And during the Russian period also, most of the Russian ambassadors were from Tatarstan. They spoke a lot of languages, etc. And they have been also living in different parts of the Russian Empire those days. There, half of the population are Muslim, half of the population are Orthodox. And it is one of the places which is, when we talk about pluralism, I don't know how you word what the difference is, I'm not, this is your field, between coexistence, acceptance, and pluralism. They're very different, each of these terms. But it is a very interesting place. Now here, it is very cold. Kazan, the capital city, is the same, if you go like this, Moscow, the same line, Moscow, and it's above Caspian Sea. It is the furthest place which Muslims were gone, northeast. And there's one specific thing is that they are the ones which were not, they did not become Muslim by force. They actually sent someone to Baghdad to come and convert them into Islam in the 10th century. So as you can imagine, it was part of the Russian Federation, Russia, communist system, Soviet system. The cities were planned the Soviet way. Public was not that important. Here, the story of his project starts with this tree. There's a tree here you can see on this end. So one day, the mayor of that neighborhood, etc., they cut this tree. And this tree was very famous in Kazan because people would come and suggest to their to-be wives, etc., under this tree, etc. So when they cut the tree, the people, they manifested. They made a big manifestation. Everybody came saying, this willow tree, why did it been historic? It's very important, etc. From there, the government decided that they have to take care of the public spaces. In the course of 6 years, they have rehabilitated and made 380 parks all over the country. It is an enormous work. So the way that that worked, first they've educated the mayors, they've educated the people for them to be a part of the fact, because the worst thing is that you want to impose something. Although this was a president's project, but that is what happened. So there was a lake in the city, for example, they cleaned up the lake. There are different, depending on what it is, there are 380 different kinds of projects. And in the industrial areas, they've brought in, these are the mosques. This is the typical mosques of Tatarstan. They've created all these public spaces that people use it a lot. So we're talking about quality of life. That is is a betterment of the quality of life in people, these places. And also, it's very important that because 6 months a year, it's all under snow, how these spaces they are used. Also, what they've done is they've created jobs. Those people who are creating these furniture, the street furniture, etc., there have been about a lot of young architects. Many of these architects are very, very young, and they had no opportunity to get big projects. They got these small projects and they started becoming. So it was also an enabling project that they did, and it is really important, as I was saying, that because others to learn how you can have impact in a very short period of time in so many places. The last project I'm showing is another project, which is done by an architect this time, an architect of a certain age, of a certain experience, quite well known in his country. So he took a risk. Usually you take risks, you do prototypes, etc. when you're young. So if you make a mistake, it's okay, nobody cares. But if you're doing your job and you take a risk and you will lose the fame, nobody will trust you to give you. I knew you were going to do that to me. So here is it's a floating school. Now, the story is the following. A teacher she was teaching in England, Bangladeshi teacher, she collects all the money she had, her retirement money, and she wants to go back and make a school in the outskirts of Dhaka for a preschool. She goes and buys land, asks her nephew, who was the architect, to go and build a school. And she had only $50,000 or something like that. When they go back, they see that it's water, there's no land. In Bangladesh, a big part of the country is flooded 3 months a year. So, and it goes up, it comes up 2-3 meters. So you have a land for 8 months, 6-7 months, and then for a few months you don't have a land. So there was no land. So she didn't have the money to go and buy land somewhere else. So she said, we have to do it where we are. That's the only thing about it. So he created this system. So as maybe you can see in these two photos, one, it is on dry land, and the other one is floating, the school. It goes up to 3 meters actually. So this is where the river is, but it comes all over the place and it takes the whole thing. So he created this technique, which is a very simple technique, using barrels. So they put some used tires, these barrels, and then these 5 classrooms, they are each independent. So it means when they float, the whole structure doesn't float together. It floats in bits and pieces. And he has got one thing which is very important. Even there's one unit, which is the toilets, also floats with this tank, because these are the small things which is very important, but you have to have how can you have an inventive way of doing something which seems very simple, but at the same time very sophisticated? Only someone with a lot of experience can do that. So he created it. The school works. I've visited the school. It is it's a very beautiful landscape where it exists, and that school has become now rather famous. A lot of people go and visit it now, and this idea of the floating school, because this is a lesson to be learned. There's so many other places in the world that they have the same problem of natural disasters. So floods happen, and it is there. So all of these are in a book called Architecture in Dialogue. I'm not doing propaganda to buy the books because the money goes to the publisher, not to me, which we publish every 3 years. We do a book on the awards that we give. And this was the last awards that we gave. Please, any questions you have, I'm here.
Thank you. I think you deserve to sit down for this.
No.
We're going to have plenty of time for questions. I think Alex and and Gulru are going to be passing the microphones around. So please just raise your hand, and he's just volunteered all the questions. If I could start very quickly with the question. This is now 40 years of these. Which of these years, which of these cycles, which of them do you think has actually had the most profound impact on the community? I mean, the Bangladeshi school seems to me just phenomenal. I've never heard of this. I think this is incredible, and it must transform the community. But which of these awards do you think, which of the projects do you think has actually had the most profound impact?
Each of them in their own way. For example, the project in Bahrain, it has a big impact because there is this, again, it has not started, but somehow that people who have lived there before, they're trying to invest, making small hotels, making some houses, some people, and that's why that it hasn't had an impact. So the way that when you walk, it's not the same old city before. So it has an impact on an urban level. The 300 parks all over the city. I mean, how much impact you can have on people's quality of life. So that has had an impact. The one in Sharjah also, for example, when you think about all these children who go, there is something that the kids love to go see birds and animals, but it's not a zoo. So also one of the important things you can imagine that in that heat of that place, when they go and visit these the birds, they're not in the aviary, they're in a climate controlled space that they could go and enjoy it. So it has an education, it has both an educational aspect and environmental aspect. So each of them has got one.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Don't ask difficult questions. Huh? I'm not gonna answer.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. Could I ask 2 questions, please? 2 questions.
2, sure. Okay. Exceptionally.
Okay, let's start with one. You said that there is a floating school. Of course, if it floats on water. So, and then you said that and it's a school, so it has toilets as well. So, what is the system to deal with the waste it produces? Because if the waste is released in water,
No, it's a septic tank.
Septic tank. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That was no. Second one, please. That was the easy one. Actually, just one word. Not. It was not even your answer was not even a sentence.
Okay. So the second question is about the pearl route.
Yes.
We know that after China has started to produce pearls, now Bahrain stands no chance to produce more pearls than China. So, and when you renovated or rehabilitated the route, the pearl route, I'm just wondering if that route had something to do with the pearl fishers, and if that route had any history with that, then what impact the rehabilitation has brought on the rehabilitation of their rich heritage of pearl cultivation and
well, cultivation. So pearls there are not cultivated pearls; they're just pearls that were natural. And it's this whole the history of pearl divers and the pearl laying. It is very important in that part of the world. And it's a lot of there are a lot of folklore around it, which is quite so. That is a story. So today, that becomes a story. With that story being told itself, can attract people. You know what I mean? So today, there are certain things that they themselves might not create the economy. So because here, as you can imagine, first of all, where those houses, which were the warehouses that they had, the pearl divers or the boats were coming, now with the reclaimed land, they're 1 kilometer behind. So they don't have this, it's finished. You know, it is the major parts, which are the harbors, etc., have been moved somewhere else. So it's a natural way of doing things. But what is it?
Did you see that as gentrification, moving them away from that? Because they were there.
First of all, gentrification is not bad always. So this is something which I always make sure that, you know, some people, you know, we've been taught that gentrification is bad. Gentrification is a way, the societies change. So the whole thing is that if you have, not to reverse it, but to make it slower. So the whole thing is, if these kinds of projects, which have been done by Sheikh Hamai, were not done in Muharraq, there would be no one living there anymore. The whole, because the people would just, everybody would go. Now they can see that people come. When they see people of tourists or other people are coming for these institutions, they feel more proud of their places. So some families have come back. For example, in one of the buildings that, first of all, it's a very interesting thing that they've done. I must explain this because I explained that it's not a very rich country. I think she has brought the concept of corporates. So each of these buildings, small houses that you go, it's a children's library, it's a museum for press and public and media. I don't know. There is another one for there are people. There are craftswomen. They're working. Each of these are bringing people in, right? So it has become an attraction, and that itself is an important fact. Then the small cafes will start. Some old cafes, I showed one of them. It's starting to come. So people are coming back. There was a couple of hotels they're making. So there is it has stopped just being a bad place. It's going to be seen. People don't go usually. We were in Cairo the other day with Safe, and we were seeing that where we're going to have a talk, right, in the old part of Cairo. We wanted to do it in the center with the Architecture Center. Everything is fantastic there, but nobody comes if you have a talk because it's so far. Those people who should listen would not come. So this whole thing of changing is very important, how you can make it. So I don't know what's the gentrification. As I said, in some places it was supposed to be very bad. Now you're staying here in the place which has been gentrified, King's Cross. Nobody dared to come here some years ago. Yeah, and now it's becoming so expensive that
people were not moved out of here.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to stay on Muharraq, and because you spoke of the site being a World Heritage Site and of the tensions between non-Civilisations and the relations that World Heritage Sites requests, I was wondering if you can expand on the role of the Ministry of Culture and the politics of bringing what you define as innovative changes in these public spaces within a World Heritage Site. I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that, how that was negotiated.
It is one of the projects which World Heritage, as I say, I always like to go to the people who they call themselves experts in that sense of to come and see. Actually, the World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage, they are fully aware of it. And 3 years ago, the big conference which is the World Heritage Conference, which they put all the lists, was held in Bahrain, exactly because of that. And it is, there are the buildings that they are there. All of them are not historically. They're not in a way so historic in that sense. Secondly, it is as I said, these new buildings. There are a couple of them are not nice. I don't say that all of them are fantastic architecturally, but as a whole thing, being bold enough to bring those architects in and do the project is fantastic. Right now, there's what's the name of the architect who did the entrance? Oli. Anyway, yeah, just. So, for example, they've done. It's a very brutal concrete space that they've created as an entrance to the building, which looks fantastic, and it has kept they have been so respectful of all the archaeological sites they've found there, and it works well. And so say UNESCO people, etc. Nobody says anything. I mean, actually, UNESCO has got its regional center in Bahrain within the system, which is, and the people who are there are very part of this whole process. So, but I keep saying that because I've seen, I hate when I go to some cities. All of a sudden you go there in some, just go to Dubai next door, to a lot of, to go to Doha. What they do is that they mimic. All of a sudden they bring these stupid lamps, which looks like the 1890 lamps that were used in Europe, and they put those in the streets. Why? Because it looks old and nice? No, here you've got something very bold, is put them there, and it's very interesting. The place of each of those lamps were negotiated with the neighbors, with the water system, because you know when you want to put it there, it's a corner of the street, it belongs to someone else, it's the water, it's the city, the pipes, etc. goes there. It's a very interesting that how they've worked really very closely with the people. I mean, with the details, you've got Saif here who's been spends a lot of time there looking at all the details of the project. And I mean, as I said, I personally think it's a very good example. And I always, whenever I see that these people who are adamant on because you see, don't forget one thing. A lot of those regulations, which was in the Athens Charter and the Venice Charter, was done by a number of people who had no idea what's happening in the rest of the world. They were looking at everything, a stone building. They did not understand that what is the other kinds of heritage which exist, and they did not believe in heritage which evolves. And that is important today. That's why I'm saying that this.
We have one there and two here.
Thank you. Does the award track the winners over the years?
No.
In any way? So
no.
We don't know if it's replicated.
We are 3 people in the office. The 122 projects around the world. We don't care what they do with the money that they win. We don't care because we always say to the jury, never say that because we are not a grant-giving organization. Never be paternalist saying that we will give you this award and use this award to continue your good work. That is just out of question. You only give when you give an award is what they do with the award is their thing. But let me explain to you one thing. The $1 million award that we give, it's divided by the winners, but all of it is not prize money. 1/2 of it is a grant that we give this grant to the winners to help them disseminate the message of the project in form of a publication, in form of a seminar, in form of exhibitions, in different, depending on the project. So they come and they use that. So this is important because dissemination, the most important thing is that others to be aware of what they've done. If we can help them, that would be very good.
Yes.
Hi. In terms of the selection criteria, it says projects must be in use for a year. Is that long enough? And then following on what the lady just said, would it not be beneficial to revisit these projects? Like 10 years ago,
if you do that, that would be very good. If I've got some volunteers who would do that. Actually, once I had this idea because I know that a lot of people do go and see these projects because they've heard about them. And some of them are some report. I personally have not seen all these 122 projects. I've seen many of them, but not all of them. Some of them don't exist anymore. They're all in ruins today. So we had an idea to be how you call it, crowd sourcing. So that we said that, okay, this is site, whoever passes by that village in Burkina Faso, please take 3 photographs and put it up so we can see how it looks like. I visited last week. I had the chance to see the Nubian Museum, and I was very happy seeing it. It was very well done. I saw a project, a park in Cairo, which was a winning project, but it is in a quite not a very good shape. But it's not because of the architect was bad, because the municipality was in charge, the Minister of Culture, I think. They just closed the door. They don't let people in. So you see, so we had another case which was in Istanbul many years ago. It got an award, and it was an administration building. And the architect had created that the ground floor would be like clinics, the doctor, the people would be public space. The administration and the minister decided that they make it into archives. So they closed all the public spaces into archives. So when it got an award, the Minister of Social Affairs was invited to, we were in, I don't know which country we were, and he promised that when I go back, because he was in front of, His Highness and all the people, that yes, we will do something. 25 years has passed, it's still the archives in Turkey, nobody can touch them. So that is why that you cannot go back and see them. Sometimes it's some projects, but by the nature of the project, certain projects are also for a certain period of time. A project is every single building which is built is not to be there forever. It changes. I mean, this whole thing, I mean, you can see how many buildings are changed.
Hello. As the need for a better built environment increases with the circumstances of the world, what opportunities does the Trust for Culture or the cultural development under AKDN support for the want to be architects or the youth that are trying to pursue a career in it, internships or experiences that they can gain from projects?
I can see that you want to come and work for us.
One day, inshallah.
No, there are a number of things. First of all, just put so the way that the AKDN's vision is that the award for architecture was created to encourage, right? The idea was that you encourage those people who've done something. Then we say, okay, we encourage, but one can educate us as well. So that's why the outcome program at Harvard and MIT were established. There were 5 chairs which were there that they are. So because we could not be a university ourselves, we gave it to them. AKU is from some years is we're talking to have a school of architecture, but this has not been finalized yet, unfortunately. And then the third one is that to show examples. So by doing good projects, as an example ourselves, so the historic cities program that you saw in the organigram, that is their job. So they go and they go. We were in Cairo again in the Azhar Park, and when you see that park, what has been the impact of that park in whole Egypt is very important. We've been in, we've got now in Farrokh, in Kabul, all the activities that we've done in Kabul, they're all opportunities for some people to work, the local people. It's not for other people to go. And but it sets examples that if you want to do a project, do it properly. This is the way to do it. You know what's very important is that, for example, our projects in Afghanistan, we don't fund them because we're doing a good job. All the other, the German government, the other governments, they want to see someone who's doing the work well, and they are always giving money. Sometimes, actually, our office in Afghanistan, they refuse funds which are coming to get new projects because they don't have the capacity to handle it. So that is why that's so. Now, internship in Switzerland, in our office in Geneva, you cannot get work permits. That's the first thing, because the Swiss laws, it's not because of us. But no, there have been some opportunities, not that much of people going and students working, but it's very difficult because, when you have a students coming and working, you have to be able to look after that person. So it means you have someone else to take. It takes a lot of energy and time. So one of the ways is that if we can disseminate the messages, that is a way that we can have an impact.
Hello, I just want to ask this quick question. Although this whole procedure is running in such a systematic way as I was looking at during the presentation, but I just wanted to ask that if you are planning any construction or if you are going to build any building in a society, you are not going to build in a vacuum. You are building in already existing culture, society, and already existing people. So I'm wondering that during your this procedure or during your this project, do you also include the ideas, perceptions, and emotions of the people around a particular place? Because this building or this construction or institution is, you know, becoming a part of their permanent life. So it may influence them during their lifetime. So are there perceptions, are there ideas are also included in your research?
So one of the jobs of the people, when I say they go to on-site review, when they go, they have a checklist. They have this report that they write in, is that they say technically it works, programmatic-wise it works, etc. There are two other questions. They go and interview the users. They go and talk to the people. And also they talk to the intelligentsia in the country to see how it's perceived, this project, by others. So it's a very kind of a comprehensive approach to be able to judge. These are the tools that we need for the jury members to be able to judge between the projects to make sure that's work. So, I mean, you cannot do any, first of all, if the people who've conceived the project at the beginning, the architects and the client together, if they had no idea what's going to happen to take into consideration, the project would have not come to that level. So already that's a thing. But we have had projects that we have seen that once you go there and you see that it's from like this, it looks fantastic, but when you go to reality, it is not the case, and that's why it does not win the award.
Can I just follow that up? Earlier, you were talking about the impact of the neighboring buildings on some sites. Does this impact, when you go out to see the judge, sometimes you see this is a great project, but next door is something horrendous that actually compromises the ability of this project to do its job?
Again, that's normal.
That's normal. Okay.
Yeah. Here right now you're here. When you came here, you started this building. There are no buildings around it, right? Now you have your view of what you had the view next door. All of a sudden you've got this whole thing coming up. You won't see, etc. So you cannot come and say that, okay, this is not a good. This building should not be judged because a horrendous thing is next to it. But what is important is that how much one can how shall I put, make sure that it takes those things into consideration, because sometimes being too outstanding will be not very good either. I mean, I'll just say that we have to repeat whatever it's, etc. But sometimes, depending in some places, it's just being stuck. I mean, just something extremely brand new standing out would be very interesting. Sometimes not. I remember the first in Amman in Jordan, the whole city is white stone. The whole city. When in 1980s, all these curtain walls, the black glass was becoming very a la mode all over the world. The first building, the first architect who dared to build something, it would look like horrendous. There was one black spot in the middle of all these white buildings. So, but then now there's so many of them that it's just
I have a question. You, as part of the presentation, you focus a lot on the post-construction of the buildings and how it improves the life of the people that use it. As part of the award, is it considered to some extent or somehow the quality and the conditions of the people that actually designed, built, constructed actually the building itself or the space that gets the award, is that taken into consideration at all?
Of course, naturally. I mean, it's part of it because, you know, there are projects, you know, sometimes this is the reality of architecture. Ideally, one has to be there, etc. But there are projects that sometimes the designers are one part of the world. It's been designed and executed in another part, and then the architects, the famous architects, they just go at the end of the day to have a look at it and how it looks like. But it doesn't mean that because if it's a good architecture, that works. See, it is not that. See, the whole thing is how much is, as an architect, your job is to make sure that you have the best knowledge of the site, of the material, of the project, of the program, everything. So if you are, because you're not doing it all alone, you are the one who put this as a program and conceived the whole ideas. And then you need the help of the engineers, you need the help of sociologists, you need the help of the decorator, many, depending on the nature of the project, so many people are involved in that. But the coordinator is the architect who puts these things together. That's why you use the word architecture. That's why you use it when you're talking about computers, you talk about the architecture of the system. It's putting it together. So they have to consider. It cannot be done without that knowledge. What is important is that how you can add, what is the added value that you do and when you leave. When you leave as a good project is done, you do a number of things. You can have an impact on the workers who've built that. So that architect, that constructor, etc., can teach new techniques. The project was given an award in Malaysia, done by Norman Foster's office, together with. So what they did, they worked with some construction contractors. And those contractors, they learned techniques, which later they became one of the best contractors in the field. And they continued, they flourished after that project because they learned a lot, how to do better the job. So, I mean, so these are very important factors as well.
And we have a question here, sir, in the back.
I almost feel like as if you just my question.
Sorry?
I'll ask it anyway. One thing that I was really intrigued about was the basis of the awards. So, for example, is it considered the future-proofing of buildings? Because I'm not sure if I heard it correct. But
I can't hear you properly.
I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, but it appeared that some of the buildings, in a way, were designed and built and left in a temporary state. Basically, the lifetime of the building wasn't too long. For those type of instances, are they opportunities where there's an award given for future-proof design, whereby maybe a building is a pavilion for one instance, but later on they show concept of how that building will later be evolved and integrated into the local area?
See, there are two things that one can say. That's one is that when an architect gets a job to do a project, his main concern is to do that properly. He's not thinking of, I'm designing something that everybody else will come and just do it, or I'll do this and later it's going to be more jobs coming for me. I mean, that they will think about it anyway. But what is important is that we're judging at one moment the project, right? And that very moment it is whatever it is. Sometimes one can see that this project has got potentials, but that is a part. Sometimes some of the projects the judges have given a project which was not perfect. They never thought that was a perfect project, but they saw that this project can make others think later with better solutions for other projects. You see what I mean? It might trigger some new ideas. So I don't know how to answer you, because it is a part of the life of in the discipline of architecture. It's like anything else. I mean, what you do, the only thing is that I keep repeating that one extra step that you take in your whatever you do in life, which is not what is only your duties. If you can think a little bit further and you bring everything one step forward, that's where it's the most important thing. And usually these projects, they have that aspect in them.
Yeah, we've got Dr. Khurshi is super keen to ask another question.
Last.
This is the third question. Be careful. Huh?
Last. How often do you change the members? How often do you select the members? Like, is there any like number of years after which you change certain members?
So the steering committee, the only person who's never changed is His Highness, who's the chairman. So the rest of the steering committee, usually they stay 2 or 3 cycles. The jury changes every cycle. No, the jury's members are not the same. It always changes.
So can I ask, you've been involved with this almost from the beginning. What are the different roles you've had with this award?
So when I started here, the award, we were a team because the award was the only institution which was doing all things. But the world was very different 40 years ago, 38 years ago. I started in 1982. I was a little kid. Documenting a project was not like that. You had to do research. So when the project would come, we would do research. And I was one of the team. We're 7 architects. So I was in charge of a group of architects who were all. So we would ask a lot of material to come from the architects. In those days, we would ask everything to come in a kind of photographs, drawings, etc., separately, because the means of someone who's sitting in an office in New York, sitting in an office in Germany, was not the same as someone sitting in Dhaka. So photocopy machine didn't exist. You know, they had these Ozali things. It was tracing paper, etc. So what we would do in order to justice to all of them, we would ask everybody to send the material to us in Geneva. And these teams were their job, which I was doing that as well, the first cycle, helping to make a dossier for each project, which are equally presented to the jury. So the jury will not be impressed by the quality of the presentation, etc. But then the world changed. So today, you get everything everywhere, etc. So that's why we are much less people working in the office. And so reproduction, producing a material, knowing today, you know, before we had to go from the office, call every architect, besides getting all the materials, interview them on the phone. And then sometimes I've got interesting stories. All of you know the project, the building, the Opera House in Sydney, right? So it's one of the most emblematic buildings of our century. And there's an architect who was the architect of the project. He's Danish. He was Danish. He's passed away. So he had done when he was very young, he had done a small bank in Tehran when he was working in Iran. And so it was a very interesting project. It's a very small one. So I remember I called him to ask some questions about the building. He said, "Oh, you're Iranian." I said, "Yes." He says, "Oh, let me tell you something." I said, "What?" He says, "You know, I worked in Iran and the Masjid al-Shah in Isfahan. And when I was designing the Sydney Opera House, those curves, you see those shells, I'm inspired by them." And I didn't say anything because of the age difference. He had said that these were the sails of the boats going to Australia. So, you know, architects change the stories all the time. So that was what I was doing there. So then I just kept being there till today, and I'm very happy.
Okay. Do we have more questions? Yes.
Without the microphone, maybe. How important do you think an appropriate response to climate is in placemaking of some of the projects, particularly?
Climate is one of these things. Today we're talking a lot about it. We're talking about climate change. But when you look at any country, any society, the climate changes are in cycles. It comes and goes. You know, you've got the drought, you've got the wet seasons, you've got the storms. It comes after 40 years, 20 years, something. And the big difference is that in the old days, people were building very slowly. So they were very much aware of all these issues. In the past 40, 50, 30, 40 years, 50 years, we built in such a speed that sometimes those things are not taken into consideration. And so, but today, climate change is, everyone talks about it. I think that it has, most of the time, it had been considered. One thing which is interesting, the concept of glass. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, if you had in a hot place, being Miami or Jeddah, it's the same. Right? It was horrible to have, you could not have a facade with just glass, because it would be hot. Inside would be like a greenhouse. But today, the glass is better, even that big, is better insulated than a thick wall. Again, I'm having stories because I was just coming back from Egypt. We were in a hotel, then we had asked for a room with with the view on the Nile. So this is an old hotel built in the 70s, late 70s. And we went there, and then my wife, she's an architect as well. She said, what the hell, we just said we want to have a Nile view. We looked at the building, and it had a very small window. It had a window on the Nile, but it was very small. But because they had half of the room, which was towards the Nile, it was blocked. It was not blocked because those days, if they would put glass, it would have been horrible. But we're talking about 30 years ago. So things has changed so quickly. And I'm by nature, I'm a very, I look at everything positively. I think that human being is capable of solving all the problems. I don't believe that, everything is going down. Everything has been going down all over history, but it's the human nature who's found something to become and do it. So I'm sure that a lot of things are going to happen in the future. Climate change is important. One has to take consideration. That the problem is that those days is that the waste, I would say, the waste of energy and resources. It is the days that, in the 70s, for example, with the oil rush and all those buildings in some of those countries were built, they were just built to make money. They were just built so fast, and actually that was a waste of energy and money in space. But I don't think that those things are not done less, because everybody's become more aware of it.
Okay, I think we should give Mr. Derakhshani we're going to grab him, we're going to take him out for a well-earned meal. So if you want to